And today, y'all, our movie is one of, if not the most influential movie of the Blaxploitation genre, and that is Superfly. Now, for me, it is definitely one of my top four Blaxploitation movies. I usually say top three with Shaft, Superfly, and the Mac, but gotta add number four being Coffee with Pam Grier. And I'm willing to bet if you were to ask most Blaxploitation fans, appreciators of the genre, Superfly would probably be in their top five. And this is actually the movie that is pretty much responsible for coining the term Blaxploitation, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, there's a lot of people that have talked about this movie because of just, again, how influential and important it is. Shout out to my guys over at, again, the Black Death One-on-One podcast. They did an episode on it. Go check it out. But Superfly came out in 1972 and it was put out by Warner Brothers. Now, at its core, this is basically a film about a dope dealer trying to get out of the game. That's really what it's about. And I would tend to say, man, the first 10 minutes of this movie to me is better than most movies, especially Blaxploitation movies altogether. So just the first 10 minutes of this movie. So I am a true fan of Superfly, and we'll get into some of the controversy around it. But who do you have in the movie? Well, my man Ron O'Neal, who played Youngblood Priest, the main character protagonist of Superfly. And the thing about this, man, is if there was ever an actor who fell victim to typecasting, it was Ron O'Neal, because not a lot of people know, man, Ron O'Neal was a classically trained actor. I think he did some Broadway stuff. But if you were to ask 9 out of 10 people what they know Ron O'Neal for, it would probably be Superfly. And that's unfortunate because dude was a great actor. He did a couple of other movies in the Blaxploitation genre. He did The Hitter with I think Sheila Fraser, who was in this with him, was in that one. And I know my man Adolph Caesar was in that. And then he did Brothers with Bernie Casey. And again, he was just a great actor, but unfortunately, it just typecast as Priest and Superfly, and that's what people got to know him for. You also have in this movie, his right hand man was Carl Lee. He played a character named Eddie, and so he was when I talk about kind of like the story behind it, he was Priest's main man who Priest wanted to get out of the game. Eddie wanted to stay in the game. You had the lovely Sheila Fraser as Priest's main squeeze, Georgia, and she reunited with him in the sequel to Superfly TNT as well. And then two other actors who had major roles was my man Charles McGregor, who played Fat Freddy. And the interesting thing about Charles McGregor is this dude, he spent 28 years in prison for two murders, double murder. I mean, I don't know if it was the same incident or if it was two different murders, but a man was in prison for like 28 years, then got out and did some acting. And then he did several Blaxploitation movies. He did Three the Hard Way. He was in That's the Way of the World, the movie with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and a couple others. And then someone else you may know is Julius Harris, who played Scatterman, who was kind of like Priest's connect to help him when Priest wanted to move up to buying bigger weight. Scatterman was the connect to help him get there. And you guys probably know Julius Harris from he played Tommy Gibbs' father, Fred Williamson, and Hell Up in Harlem and Black Caesar. He played Bubble Top Woodson, and I think it was either Uptown Saturday Night or Let's Do It Again, one of the ones with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier, and then he was in several other movies. So those were kind of like the main five: Ron O'Neal, Carl Lee, Sheila Fraser, Charles McGregor, and Julius Harris. Okay, and like I said, if I were to tell you about the movie, there's a bunch of other people that have done um, synopsis reviews on this movie. Shout out to, again, Nubius Black and Johnny Depp over at the Black Death One-on-One podcast, because they did an episode on Superfly. So I may not be adding anything new, but I just wanted to give my take on it. So the overview of it is, like I said, Priest, he's a coke dealer cocaine dealer who wants to get out of the game, and he has a plan for like one final score that will allow him to walk away, him and Eddie to walk away with $1 million cash. So that's what he's kind of got in mind is, dude, let's do this one final score. We can get out of the game and walk away and not have to worry about this stuff anymore. Um, he then reaches out to Scatter, Julius Harris, to for help in buying the product that he needs to kind of go up and get enough to make that one last score. Now, one of his dealers, Fat Freddy, gets popped. And, when Freddy got popped by the cops, he ultimately winds up ratting Priest out. Now, how this all came about, let me share a scene with you. Freddy owed Priest some money, and Priest was like, "Man, you gotta get my money." So, Freddy went out, did the job, got the money, but ultimately, not because of what he did, but in another incident, Freddie got poached by the cops. And basically, when they took him in, they shook him down to get information on who he was working for. He gave up Priest. But let me show you this scene where Priest kind of went hard on Freddie because Freddie owed him some money. So let's peep that real quick.
This ain't the first time for you, Trick. I've had to wait for as long as a month on you for my money. Now, you trying to take advantage of me, Freddie. This time your black ass is going to work.
Priest, all I do is sell coke, man. I don't do no violence. I don't mess with no fire.
No, listen, active nigga. Don't argue with me, man. I'm trying to give you a chance. Now, you don't get me my money tonight. I'm gonna put that young girl of yours out on Horse Road.
Listen, Priest, that's my wife you talking about,
so
man.
So what? Now, somebody's going to work tonight, Freddie. You really shouldn't have fucked with my money, Freddie.
You're gonna get my money too. Oh man, gotta love it. And then so like I said, Freddie gets him the rats Priest out. He with Priest actually, in terms of wanting to get out of the game, he tells Georgia, his girl, about it, and she's excited because she's down for it. She want to get out of the game, live a regular normal life. During all this, Priest and Eddie get hemmed up by the mob, who find out that they're trying to buy more weight because because it was Scatter's Connect. And so basically they're now saying that, hey, you're gonna sell for us. And so, Eddie's excited about it because he's like, hey, we cut Scatter out and now we get to deal directly with the Connect. But Priest, he really ain't feeling it. So then Scatterman, because they don't need him anymore, he gets killed trying to go on the run but what he did, because he knew that they were after him, he gave Priest the lowdown on the man who's kind of behind all of this. Now, Priest, once he finds this out, he goes to see Eddie to tell him, man, look, I'm out. I'm done with this. I'm out. Well, there's no loyalty amongst hustlers. So Eddie winds up snitching Priest out to the big man's cronies, and they send the police after him. Now they're trying to bust him with either, the money or the product, but Priest is clean because what he's done is he's covertly given, the money that he was going to walk away with. He's given that to Georgia, who was in disguise. So when the cops do ultimately pick Priest up and take him to this big boss guy, the big boss is trying to tell Priest he can't quit. I own you, type of deal. And Priest is like, nah, man, that ain't going down. And so basically, it ends up where Priest kind of lets him know, I took a policy out for you, big man. And if something happens to me, you and your whole family, it's over with. So that is really kind of how it all boiled down to it. Now, in addition to the top actors that played in there, you had some heavy hitters in the directing and producing vein. So the director was Gordon Parks Jr. Gordon Parks Sr., his father, was the one that produced or directed Shaft. Gordon Parks Jr. did Superfly. And then the producer was Sig Short, and Sig Short did several other Blaxploitation movies as well. Like I said, he did That's the Way of the World. the Earth, Wind, and Fire movie that Charles McGregor was also in, and then a couple of others. So um, that's kind of what you have. Oh, and regarding Sig Shore, the kind of the man, the quote unquote man who was behind all of this, who didn't want to let Priest get out of the game and said Priest was working for him. Was, the character is named Deputy Commissioner Reardon. But Sig Shore, the producer, played that role. He didn't come into the movie until at the very end, like the last 3 or 4 minutes of the movie. And he was in the credits, he was billed as Mike Richards, but it was actually Sig Shore, the producer. So, a little interesting note there. Now, again, if we talk about the impact that the movie had, well, let's go back and talk again. One of the things I love and why I say this movie, the first 10 minutes of it was better than most Blaxploitation movies as a whole, is just in the first 10 minutes alone, you got beautiful scenes shot in, Harlem, New York. You got Priest looking super fly with Superfly. You got Priest looking cool with the threads that he has on. You got the scene where he's just kind of like chilling with his lady in the bed. You got the music from Curtis Mayfield, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So it was just a whole bunch of stuff going on. So I want to show you kind of part of the opening scene where Priest leaves and gets into his ride. The rides in the movie were fly. So I want to show you this scene where he goes and hops in his ride. So let's check that one out real quick. So, um, you know, he was dressed to the nines, man, dapper down, got in the fly Cadillac Eldorado pimp mobile. So that is some of the finer parts of the movie. But again, if we kind of talk about some of its influence and impact, I said that Superfly could be single-handedly responsible for the coining of the term Blaxploitation, and that I mentioned this a few episodes back. But for those that don't know, the word Blaxploitation was kind of brought into the landscape by a guy by the name of Junius Griffin, who was the head of a chapter of the NAACP. I don't know if it was LA or not. I believe it was LA. But what happened is he was like a press agent, public relations type of guy. And he was trying to get the account for this movie, for Superfly. And when he did not get the account, he started bad mouthing it and saying negative things about the movie and saying it was exploitative and calling it black exploitation, which ultimately morphed into Blaxploitation. So I always like to say that he came up with the term out of spite, like because he didn't get the movie. Now, had he got the account for the movie, would we even have the term Blaxploitation? Who knows? And here's the thing: this developed into him and Roy Ennis developed this coalition against Blaxploitation to start trying to protest against black movies. Prior to the term Blaxploitation, a lot of people referred to these types of films as Black Power movies, which is very much more positive than the term Blaxploitation. But the interesting thing about Junius Griffin as a whole, and I mentioned this a few episodes back, is he wound up executive producing a Blaxploitation movie, Detroit 9000, which, I liked it. And so just the fact that, again, he came up with it because he couldn't get the account of Superfly is pretty interesting. Now, with Superfly, there are people who will laud this movie for its social context. Some people, I've heard people say, well, Priest is an anti-hero who's a hero, because he's sticking it to the man and, he's forced into the game and, but he's trying to get out. So, they'll applaud it and laud it for its social context. But then there's others, and this was back at the time when it first came out, and still even today, there are others who will bash this movie saying it glorifies drug dealing and hustler culture. But really, again, at its core, the story is about a dealer trying to get out of the life, not glorifying it. And but one of the things that I will say is I can see how some people say that because there have been people who have said that Superfly influenced them to get into the dope game, like Freeway Ricky Ross, not the rapper, but the drug dealer, the big drug dealer, Freeway Ricky Ross. He has mentioned that Superfly influenced him to get into drug dealing. And one of the scenes in the movie that I kind of think for anybody that does say this encouraged him to get into the game, this is the scene that I think they probably would refer to.
You're gonna give all this up. 8-track stereo, color TV in every room, and can snort a half a piece of dope every day. That's the American dream, nigga.
It's the American dream. So, and then some people will even say, as we talk about cultural impact, some people will even say that Superfly transcends Blaxploitation genre as a whole, but it's not even a Blaxploitation movie. I have a friend who is like a professor of film studies at one of the local universities, and we had this conversation, and he said, based on how he defines Blaxploitation, he said that Superfly falls outside of the Blaxploitation genre. Now, of course, I wasn't feeling that, and most people that you would talk to will probably say, "Nah, Superfly is definitely Blaxploitation." And to me, at its simplest core definition, what I term Blaxploitation is movies made in the 70s, so from 1970 to 79, that were primarily black themed, predominantly black cast, black storyline, plot, and the whole nine. So whether it was produced, directed by a white person or a black person, to me, if it was in the 70s, it was predominantly black cast and told a black storyline. To me, that's what I consider falls in the Blaxploitation genre. And I think also that's for me why when a lot of people might say Blaxploitation was negative, I don't feel that way because again, a lot of the movies that fall into my definition, they were pure, wholesome, wonderful movies. So, that's just how I look at it, and that's the way we approach it on this show. Now, there are a couple of pet peeves that I have about Superfly, and not the movie in itself, but I think how it's perceived and what things that have happened as a result of it. And so my three biggest pet peeves are, number one, people who think Superfly was a pimp. Like I said, he was a coke dealer trying to get out of the game. So sometimes when people don't really know, and again, I think that's the people who kind of lump the negativity of Blaxploitation, saying it was about pimps and pushers and the whole that. A lot of people may confuse or think that Superfly was a pimp movie and that Priest was a pimp. He wasn't. He was a drug dealer. The second thing that's a pet peeve of mine is the fact that some people think his character's name was Superfly. It wasn't. His character's name was Youngblood Priest. So when I hear people say, refer to the character as Superfly, I get ticked off about that. And then the third thing is that's a pet peeve of mine are the sequels and the remakes. There was Superfly came out in 1972. There was a sequel in 1973, Superfly TNT, which was Ron O'Neal, Sheila Frazier. Superfly TNT was okay. There's no way it was going to stand up and compare to the original, but it was just, again, it. Then in 1990, there was a movie made called The Return of Superfly with this guy named Nathan Purdy. And he played Youngblood Priest. And that was just a horrible movie, man. I remember when it came out in 1990. And then recently, I think it was either 2024 or 2025, there was a remake of Superfly. I didn't see that at all, but for me, because I love Blaxploitation and I deem a lot of these as classics, I don't even want to entertain the thought of remaking some of these. And so just the fact that somebody thought they could remake Superfly, just I'm not feeling it. Okay. So again, that is to me one of the best Blaxploitation movies. Superfly, definitely very important in the genre and has a huge impact. So